Okay, ready? Tonight's class, as always, is in the memory of Yitzchak, Tzvi, and Yosef. So we're going to talk tonight about Kalev. Kalev in English. I don't even know how to pronounce it in English. Kalev? Kalev? You heard of him? Betach. Okay. What? You don't remember. We're going to open the Gemara, actually. Yeah. So basically, here's the story. In this week's Torah reading, I'm going to start from this week's Torah reading because it is this week. The two of the tribes of Israel, the tribes of Reuben and Gad, come to Moshe and say, we want to live on the other side of the Jordan River, on the east banks of the Jordan River. We have a lot of very fertile grass over here for our cattle. And when they first come to Moshe, Moshe becomes petrified. And the Torah says in this week's Torah reading, Moshe gets very angry at them. And he thought that they weren't interested in fighting for the land of Israel. They had lost their morale. They didn't have the inner strength and courage to fight, to conquer the land of Israel. Just like the spies 39, 40 years earlier also had lost courage. We talked about them at great length a few weeks ago. They also didn't want to go fight to enter the land of Israel, and they came back with a negative report, hoping that they would stay in the protection of God's clouds of glory and God's protection. And what happened? As Moshe says to these two tribes that come to him, asking for permission to stay on the other side, on the east side of the Jordan River, he says, don't you remember what happened? The spies were sent to go scout out the land. And I don't have the source sheet for you, but basically they went and they came back with a very negative report. And because of their negative report, God became angry. And God made an oath. And God said, by my life, not one of the people that came out of Egypt that were counted in the census, not one of those men, by the way, I'll point out the women did go. It was the men that got punished and weren't allowed to go. Not one of those men was allowed to enter into the land of Israel, except says chapter 32, verse number 12, Bilti except Kalev ben Yefuneh Haknizi, Kalev, the son of Yefuneh, the Knizi, the Yeshua ben Nun, and Joshua, who we talked about last week's class. Why? Kimilu acharei Hashem. They filled their hearts to go wholeheartedly after Hashem. We all know the story. These are the two people the two of the 12 spies that came up with a positive report. And therefore, on that day, Hashem got angry with the Jewish people, and he made them wander the desert for 40 years. And now you are doing again the same. You're replacing your fathers to do the same evil, to speak bad about the land, to give up hope, to lose morale, etc. So because this week's Torah reading mentions clearly how Kalev and Joshua were the two people that didn't get punished. They were the only two men of that generation who were allowed to actually enter the land of Israel. Last week we talked about Joshua, Yeshua, and today I'm going to show you how in some ways Kalev was even greater than Yeshua. I'm going to tell you what I didn't tell you last week. Okay? So first, a little genealogy, a little family history. Not too much, I don't want to confuse you, but I know it's always interesting to know who is who. So the Torah tells us who is Kalev's father. Kalev ben Yefuneh Haknizi, which means the son of Yefuneh, the Knizi. The Knizi from the land of Knaz. The one from the land of Knaz, or the son of Knaz. So it happens to be a problem, because if you look in Tanakh, if you look in the book of Joshua, when we find the formal introduction of the family of Kalev, he's actually there called the son of Chetzron. So we find verses in the book of Joshua that describe Kalev ben Chetzron. So is his father Chetzron or is it his father Yefuneh? It's a problem. So the Talmud actually tells us it was one man, but his name was changed because Yefuneh is from the name he changed. Yefuneh, Yifna Liboy, he turned his heart to go after Hashem. So his father's name was changed to describe the greatness of his son Kalev, that he remained loyal to God. He didn't get distracted by following after the other spies. In fact, in the Gemara, in Saita, it gives a whole bunch of different names by which Kalev is described. Mered, and Yesher, and Shebab, and Ardain, and each name is a different description of how he overcame the temptation of the spies, how he broke Shever, Yesher, he stayed straight, and he didn't get distracted. Shebab, he broke his evil inclination, Each one, Arden was that he ruled over his evil inclination, would Rodet to be a ruler over. Each name that's somewhere in Tanakh is a reflection of the inner strength of character and the inner ability of Kalev to overcome the temptation to join the spies. That's first of all. Second of all, there's another family tidbit before we get to the juice of the class, the meat of the class. Knizi, why is he called a Knizi? He was a Jew. He wasn't a Knizi. Knizi, Knaz is a nation. So actually, he had a stepfather too. What? Canaan. There's different. The Knizim was one of the nations of the land of Israel. So why is he called the Knizi? So the Talmud actually says that his father died and his mother remarried, and his stepfather's name was Knaz. So that's why he was called Kalev, the son of Yefuneh Haknizi, who was the stepson of Knaz. Say the stepson. He had a stepfather. In addition, he had two wives. The famous wife is Miriam, the brother-in-law of Moshe. He was married to Miriam. But you know who else he was married to? The Gemara in Megillah says he was married to Batya, the Egyptian princess that adopted Moshe and converted him, became a Jew. So Kalev was married to Miriam.
40 years after the Exodus, right?
This story of the spies happens right away after. The story of the spies happened about a year after the Exodus. Now, this parsha is 40 years later, when the Jews are about to enter the land of Israel. Every one of Kalev's colleagues has died out. The only two men of that generation still alive is Kalev and Yeshua.
I'm just trying to do that, how he married to Batya, who adopted Moshe when he was a baby.
But she was a princess. She was a teenager. She was a young girl. Batya wasn't so old. She was the daughter of Pharaoh. She was the daughter of Pharaoh. That's not so hard to think. Now, by the way, one more just tidbit. When Kalev was married to Miriam, he had sons with both wives. He had sons with Miriam. He had sons with Batya. But his most famous son is Hur. Hur is the one, when the Jews were worshiping the golden calf, who stood up to them and said, what you're doing is wrong, and they stoned him to death. That was Kalev's son.
So who is from Miriam?
From Miriam and Kalev. Okay? So all that is just the family tidbit, the Jews, whatever. As far as there's no rated R stories in his life, no crazy stuff, but he had two wives, Miriam and Batya. He had multiple fathers, stepfathers, and he was a brother-in-law of Moshe. He was the prince of the tribe of Yehuda. And now we're going to go to the story. Well, the story. Okay? What is the story? The story of the spies coming back from Israel. Now, I really wish that I had the text for all of you to read. I have it right here on the screen in front of me, but I wish you would all have it to read yourself. The spies go to the land of Israel. We all discussed the story at great length. They come back, and 10 of the spies are carrying food, and they say a terrible thing, and the land is terrible, and it consumes its inhabitants, and we'll never be able to conquer it. We're going to die in the desert, and Moshe is terrible for bringing us here, blah, 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 right? Then what happens? Kalev silences them. And how does he silence them? He pretends like he's part of them. And so he says, is that all that Ben Amram did to us? And he speaks about Moshe in a very derogatory way. Instead of saying Moses or Rabbeinu, our teacher, instead he says, the son of Amram. Right? It's like a very derogatory way of speaking about someone. So everyone gets quiet to hear. And they all thought that he was one of them. The other 10 spies, Joshua never speaks. Joshua doesn't give a chance to speak. They all knew that Joshua, Yehoshua, as we discussed last week, is Moshe's goody-goody. I shouldn't say it that way. That's not a nice way of saying it. But he was his loyal servant. He never left his tent. He stayed for 40 days by the side of the mountain. We know that story. But Kalev was one of them. Kalev's a cool guy. Kalev is a prince of the tribe, and he's successful, and he's obviously charismatic, and he's talented. And so they had assumed that Kalev would be one of their leaders, one of their spokespeople. And in fact, the entire time, the 40 days that they were traveling in the land of Israel, it's obvious, if you think about this, that Kalev never once argued with them. He never said what you're doing is wrong. He never said don't rebel against God or rebel against Moshe. How do I know that? No. How do you know that? They let him speak. The fact that the spies let Kalev get up to speak proves that the whole time that they were traveling, they thought he was with them. Right? Yeshua, they knew. Yeshua's in the camp of Moshe. He's bought and paid for. But Kalev, he's one of our guys. So Kalev gets up. He said, "Is that all that Ben Amram did? He also split the sea. He also gave us the bread from heaven. He also gave us the meat. He gave us all these miracles. He took such good care of us. If he did all that for us, he can also get us into the land of Israel." Okay. What happens afterwards? God gets very, very upset. And the cloud of glory appears over the cloud. And the people realize that they sinned against Hashem. And Hashem is very angry at them. And then what does God say? I'm going to turn back over here. I want to read you the exact words. So it's in chapter 14, verse 24. Hashem then says that all of these people, they're going to die in the desert. Moshe prays to Hashem. Moshe says to Hashem, please don't kill them. They, if you destroy the entire nation, the Egyptians will say that you took them out of Egypt to kill them in the desert because you weren't strong enough to bring them into Israel. Remember that? If all the Jews would just suddenly die in the desert, the nations will say, the powerful God that was able to kill the Egyptians couldn't conquer the 31 kings who lived in Canaan, and so that's why he killed them in the desert. So don't kill them all out. Don't kill them. And God agrees to Moshe, and God says to Moshe, I won't kill them all at once. However, since they didn't want the land of Israel, they're never going to inherit the land. Except, verse 24, where are we? Over here. All these men that saw my glory, and they still test me these 10 times, they will never enter the land. However, and I really wish you had this verse in front of you. This is a special verse. 1 second. Verse 24 says God the following words. Listen to the following words. Va'avdi. However, my servant, Kalev, the hero of today's class, because there was another spirit with him, he filled himself to go after me, which Rashi says, it means he filled his heart. It's a short verse. He filled his heart to follow after God and to stay loyal and faithful to God, not to be tempted by the sin of the spies. Therefore, I will bring him back to the land to which he came. What's the land to which he came? In general sense, the land to which he came is Israel. What? Let me finish the verse. And his descendants will inherit the land. So Rashi tells us, what's the land to which he came? Hebron. How do we know that he gets Hebron? So later in the book of Joshua, Rashi quotes a verse from the book of Joshua. And again, I really wish I could show this to you. See that I'm not making it all up. You see it yourself. But in the book of Joshua, it says that Kalev inherits the land by Hebron. Why does Kalev deserve to inherit the city of Hebron? So earlier it says that when they traveled, it says Vaya'alu, they in plural went up to scout out the land. Vayavoi al Hebron, and he came to Hebron where Isham, Achiman, Sheshe, V'Talmai, where the giants are buried over there. So the verse starts off in the plural that they, the spies, went up, and then it says Vayavo, and he came to Hebron. How does it make sense? So Rashi there tells us from the Gemara that they all went up to Israel. But Kalev snuck away from the group. One night he disappeared. He played, he snuck out there when you were in college or in yeshiva, whatever. He snuck out of he snuck out of the dorm. He ran away for a night. Where did he go? He went to go pray for help from God, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He went to Hebron, to Ma'arat HaMachpelah, to the cave of our forefathers, to the cave of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, of Sarah, and Rivka, and of Leah. And there he prayed for mercy. He prayed for divine help. And then he returned back to the spies. Seemingly the spies don't even know he went and came. He went there alone, not even with Yeshua. He went all by himself. And because he went to Hebron by himself, God says in this verse, in verse 24 of chapter 14, I will give him as his reward that land to which he came. I will give to him and to his descendants for all of time as an inheritance. Okay. It's a very beautiful verse. But I want to point out something very important over here. How many spies didn't sin? One or two? Two spies didn't sin. Yeshua and Kalev. And yet, if you look in verse 24, when God says that all the people that sin, they're going to die in the desert and their corpses will rot over here, he doesn't mention once the word Yeshua. The whole paragraph, the whole chapter, not the whole chapter, the whole piece. Talking, and again, you'll trust me on this. You can double check it later if you want. He's talking over here about the people that sinned. He says, except, no one will see it, except in verse 24, except for my servant, the Avdi, my servant. For God to call you my servant is very special. Kalev, because there was a Ruach Acheres Imo. There was another spirit with him. Therefore, and he went after me. He filled his heart to go after me. Therefore, he will inherit the land. Yeshua is not mentioned at all by God. Not mentioned. Here in our parsha, this week, when we read the Torah 40 years later, and Moshe is repeating, all the people will die out. He says, everyone died out except for Kalev and Yeshua. But God didn't say that. If you pay attention, God only speaks about Kalev only, not about Yeshua. Why? And by the way, the words, he filled his heart to go after me, the same words in our parsha, in the parsha of Shlach, the same words, he filled his heart. But when God is talking, not when Moshe is talking, he says something very unique. What did Kalev do to deserve this distinction, to be the only person of his generation to merit to enter into the land of Israel? So the words that God uses about my servant Kalev is that he had a ruach acheres imo. A different spirit was with him. Those are the words.
That was like the spirit protecting him there as opposed to Moshe praying over you.
Okay, no. That was when he went to pray at Hebron. The word ruach acheret, there's another spirit with him. So how do you translate those words? So Rashi tells us the ruach acheret means that his spirit was not like his speech. The way Kalev felt inside was different from the way he spoke outside. On the outside, as I mentioned already before, how did he behave? Like one of the other 11 spies. So much so they were willing to let him talk and be part of their group, and they thought he was one of them. 40 days, 40 nights, they're traveling together. He doesn't tell them what he really thinks. He acts one way. Why? Because he knew that he would have the opportunity to try and influence the Jewish people only if they're not suspicious of him. So he plays a double agent over here. He's cunning. He's a real spy. You know, the double agent is a spy, and then there's a spy who's spying on the spies, right? Those are the real agents. So he was a spy on the spies. He was a double agent, and so he acted one way, but his spirit, his heart, was a different way. And that's what God is praising, says Rashi, that his spirit was with me. Even when he pretended not to be with me, even when he pretended to be part of the other 10 spies, since his spirit was with me, he remained loyal. That's what he'll inherit the land. That's how Rashi explains. I want to share with you the most beautiful explanation of the Or HaChaim on this verse. Okay, I learned it today. It's beautiful. Beautiful. The Or HaChaim explains these words differently. He says, what was the different spirit? Yeshua is not mentioned in this verse, as I already pointed out. And the Or HaChaim asks, why is Yeshua not mentioned? Yeshua never had any moment of struggle whether or not to follow along with the idea of the spies or to remain loyal to Moshe. Remember last week we talked about Joshua. What's his life story? A person that never left the side of his master. When Moses goes up the mountain, he sat there. He didn't go back to the yeshiva to go learn, to intellectually stimulate himself. He stayed at the foot of the mountain, pitched his tent there, he ate there, he slept there. He was oblivious to anything else going on in the camp. All he was doing was waiting for Moshe Rabbeinu. He was the first one in the yeshiva in the morning, the last one to leave. His whole life revolved around Moshe. He had nothing else that mattered to him besides for Moshe. He didn't hang out with other people. He didn't care to spend 40 days alone waiting on the mountainside for his teacher, for his master to return. So was there ever a moment of struggle when Yeshua was tempted to be lazy, to be spiritually selfish, which is a sin of the spies, which we talked about in the earlier class, and to not enter the land of Israel? No. It never entered his mind. Go against my teacher, go against my master, go against Moses. It was impossible. It never entered his mind. I'm a loyal servant of whatever Moshe tells me to do. Moshe gave me a mission to go scout out. I'm going to do exactly what Moshe says. He says we're inheriting the land. I'm with him. So Yeshua was one-sided, one dimension. But Kalev, says Arachayim, had two different spirits within him. There were moments when Kalev wanted to do the right thing, when he wanted to stay true to his mission, true to Moshe Rabbeinu. And there were moments when Kalev was tempted to give into the sin of the spies, and to give into peer pressure, and to give into being like everybody else, and to give into the selfish, spiritual selfishness and the laziness of remaining in the clouds of glory and remaining in the desert. And he was tempted. He understood the other 10 spies. He agreed with the other 10 spies. He wanted to behave like the other 10 spies. And for 40 days and 40 nights, he couldn't decide. He knew what was right, but his heart was pulling him somewhere else. His heart was pulling him to be like the other guys, to be like his friends. That was his temptation. That was his urge. That was his desire. And finally, they returned back after 40 days of struggle, after 40 days of uncertainty, 40 days where he doesn't know, who am I? And now he's standing, this moment of truth arrives, and he sees the 10 spies are standing there speaking bad about the land of Israel. And he sees Moshe and Aaron, and they're crying, and he sees at that moment, Ruach Acheret Imo. There was another spirit that was with him. He left behind the indulgence and the desire and whatever he wanted to do with his heart, and he chose on his own to do what was right. That's what God is saying in this verse. God is saying in this verse, V'avdi Kalev, my servant Kalev. My servant Kalev. Why my servant Kalev? To be a servant means not that I worship God because I want to worship God. Doesn't mean that it's my temptation. I'm doing what God says because, I want to do what God says. If you do what God says because you want to do what God says, you're a very good person. You're very righteous and very moral and very spiritual. But the definition of a servant is that I serving my master. I'm doing what I'm told to do, whether I want to or not, whether I feel like it or not. So God says, my servant Kalev, my servant, because there was a ruach acheret imo, because he was able to find in himself another side, another spirit, another emotional, another spirit that was able to overcome his emotional desire to be like the spies. Because of that, vayimale achara, he filled his heart to make his heart go after me. Therefore, I shall bring him to the land to which he came, to the land of Hebron, and there his inheritance will inherit the land. You understand what's happening over here? So let me put this into context for you. Last week, we talked about Yeshua. And I told you I was trying to bring out the quality and the praise of Yeshua. What was the praise of Yeshua? He wasn't born a tzaddik. He wasn't born into a family of rabbis. Last week we made the contrast between Moshe's biological children and Yeshua, who was not a biological child of Moshe, but he became the spiritual child of Moshe. That was the level of Joshua. He was able to reach a place where he became totally connected to Moshe, so much so, he was the first one there, the last one to leave. His whole heart and soul was connected to his teacher, that even though he wasn't born into it, he chose it. True. But now I want to tell you what I didn't say last week. Yeshua chose it. That's true. But guess what? You know why Yeshua chose it? It was his personality to choose it. When Yeshua chose to be the loyal servant of Moshe, when he chose to give over his heart and his soul and his life and everything that his whole existence, his whole identity, to be the loyal servant of Moshe, it wasn't his biological personality, but it was his emotional personality. Yeshua was still doing what he naturally was. There was not a moment of struggle where Yeshua was tempted to say, you know what? Even though I wasn't born this way, I don't want to be it. It was clear to him. I'm not Moshe's child, but I want to be his child. And I'm going to do everything I can to become his spiritual child. So is Yeshua great? Absolutely. He made a tremendous choice, and he dedicated his heart, his soul, his life, his entire existence was to be the servant of his master. And that's why I forgot to say last week, he was like the sun. Moshe was like the sun, he's the moon. He reflected, like the moon reflects the sun, he reflected his teacher perfectly. However, even though he made a choice that was easy for him. He made a choice that was natural for him. And Yeshua became the person he chose to become the person that was his personality. Yeshua wasn't a charismatic, I don't know Yeshua, I'm sure he wasn't. He wasn't one of the guys, let me put it that way. He wasn't, say, one of the chevra. You know what one of the chevra means? He wasn't one of the guys that hang out together, that party together, that talk together, that chill. He was, I don't want to use the word goody-goody because it's almost like derogatory. But he was, we said last, he was a lad that didn't leave his teacher's tent. He's called a lad because he was straight and simplistic and absolute and wholesome in his commitment to Moshe. There was no conflict in his life. There was no struggle in his life where he was pulled in two directions and had to choose between the two. Well, he was a scholar, but there's many scholars that are conflicted. Being a scholar doesn't mean that you're not conflicted with the choices in your heart. Your brain can be very scholarly and your heart can be pulled in a different direction. So Yeshua was a wonderful man. Again, I sound like I'm diminishing Yeshua. He was very holy. He was very spiritual. He becomes the next leader of the Jewish people. But at the end of the day, Yeshua did something which was his nature. It was his nature. Correct. Excellent. Thank you, Nofar. He didn't make a sacrifice for his choice. There was no struggle before he made his choice. So it was a good choice. It's a holy choice. And he becomes the next leader of the Jewish people as a reward for the right choices he made. But some people naturally have an easy time making the right choices. They're naturally well-behaved kids. They naturally enjoy learning. They naturally enjoy getting rewarded. They naturally enjoy feeling accomplished through hard work. So such a kid, they make the right choice. They sit in yeshiva. They go to school. They do good on their tests. The teacher loves them. The parents love them. Everyone loves them. Yoni. There's many kids. And they're naturally holy kids. They're naturally good, and they love to learn. They love to be in shul. They love to participate. They want to help. That's the story of Yeshua. And Yeshua's a good example. He wasn't, let's say, born that we could get it born, but like, it's not my natural upbringing. Yeshua wasn't born into a famous family. He was from the tribe of Ephraim. Someone asked him which tribe he was from. I had to look it up. He was from the tribe of Ephraim, but he wasn't like one of the illustrious families. Kalev is a whole different story. Kalev, he came from an important family, it's true. But Kalev also had a Yetzer Hara. Kalev says the Or HaChaim, it's not me saying the Or HaChaim, he had a desire to sin. He had a desire to be like his friends and to join the other spies in choosing not what Moshe had told them to do, which at the time seemed like a better choice to them. And he struggled with this choice. He was deeply, deeply conflicted. He had two different voices in his head. You know what it means, two voices in your head? Two voices in your head doesn't mean that you're bipolar. It means that you're a Jew with two souls. That's what it means. Yeah. Two voices in your head is a story of the Jewish struggle. Some people don't have it because some people they're like Yeshua. They're like a simple, straight. They got clarity in their life's mission. They go. But many of us, we have two voices in our head. And there's a part of me that understands this is what I should do. This is the right thing. This is what I was commanded to do. This is my mission to do. And then we have a different spirit inside us that says, hey, look at the guys. Look at how much fun they're having. Look what you can do here. Look what you can do there. Enjoy, it'll be easier, it'll be more fun. Why do you have to stay loyal to your mission? No one else is doing the mission anyway. Go enjoy life, do what's easier for you. Yeah? It's a real struggle. And says God the following words. Yeshua is not mentioned here. Because God knows what's in our hearts. Even though both Yeshua and Kalev in action did the same thing. I mean, not exactly. The Ramban explains that Kalev is singled out and not Yeshua because Kalev spoke and Yeshua didn't speak. But according to the way we're explaining the story, in action, they both didn't sin. But God doesn't judge us only by our actions. God knows what struggle we had to make the right choice. And so God knows that even though both Yeshua and Kalev made the right choice, Yeshua made the right choice because it was easy for him. That was his personality. That was his whole life. He dedicated his life to serving Moshe. He had no other options. Kalev had to struggle before he made that right choice. Kalev had to work very, very hard to be able to find the other spirit of God within him that allowed him to overcome. And God saw how hard that choice was for him. God recognized the challenge and the struggle and the conflict before that choice. And because God appreciates the conflict, the internal conflict that he had to struggle with before he made the right choice, therefore God singles out only Kalev and not Yeshua. And only Kalev is described as Va'avdi Kalev, my servant Kalev. Because for God, to be a servant of God doesn't mean you make the right choice. It means you're willing to sacrifice. You're willing to overcome temptation to make the right choices. Why does God give us temptations? Why does God give us these evil urges? To test us, not to test us, and to allow us to overcome. If God wouldn't give us temptation, if God wouldn't give us, whether it's laziness or indulgence or whatever immoral temptations or greed or desire for money or whatever, every one of us has our temptation. Our challenge and our desire, where even though our brain tells us this is the wrong ethical thing to do, or this is the wrong moral choice to make, and I know I shouldn't look at this thing, I know I shouldn't touch this thing, I know I shouldn't eat this thing, and yet my heart wants it. Why does God give us that?
Because that's the story of Genesis, Adam and Eve. God told Adam not to eat the apple, and he went against God's orders and ate the apple.
Exactly.
And now he made people mortal, which means you can replicate offspring. Because the Garden of Eden was supposed to be for just Adam and Eve, but then it became for everybody.
Exactly. So the point over here is, the reason why God gives us these temptations is because the definition of a servant is someone that works to make the right choice. In Tanya, it describes at great length the difference between an Eved Hashem, a person who earns a title, and the person who's serving, and the Asher Lo Yavodah, the one that's not working to serve God. You can have a tzaddik, Asher Lo Yavodah, which the Tanya, I don't get into too great in detail, but the Alter Rebbe explains in great detail in Tanya. The Alter Rebbe explains you can have a tzaddik that already reached the level of tzaddik, which means for him to wake up in the morning and to study and to pray and to be kind and to be loving and to be patient. It's all already in his nature. It's already all with his personality. There's never a moment when he struggles to serve God. He's a finished product. He has a name tag on his door. Here is the office of tzaddik so-and-so. He is a tzaddik. He behaves like a tzaddik. His actions are all right choices. But he's considered, in the verse in Mishlei, Asher Lo Yavodah. He's considered, it says in the Mishlei, King Solomon says, he's the one that does not work to serve God. Meaning he's serving God, but he's not working to serve God. And however, says King Solomon, then you have the other person who is a servant of God. No, in King Solomon, the verse in Mishlei, very easy. She's tzaddik. I didn't look it up now, but there's a difference between the tzaddik, between a tzaddik and a rasha. This is what King Solomon says. There's a difference between a tzaddik and a rasha, between one who serves God to one who does not serve God. So it's not the same thing. And I don't want to go through the whole chapter of Tanya now. It's not the same thing. There's a tzaddik and there's a rasha. There's one that makes the right choices and one that makes the wrong choices. But even in making the right choices, there's moments of those right choices are natural, and there's moments of those right choices are a struggle. They're a struggle. The uniqueness of Kalev, the reason why God only talks about Kalev in the book in the parsha of Shlach and does not mention Yeshua, and he calls him my servant, is because God saw the struggle he made to make the choice he made. And because God sees the struggle and the challenge, that's why he becomes the servant of God. To be called the servant of God is a very high level. It's a very high level. It means you had real challenge and you overcame.
Did he know that God spoke about him?
Did Kalev know? Probably. Did Kalev know that God said that he would live and not die out with other people? I'm going to assume that Moshe told him. I'm going to guess so. I don't know for a fact, but I'm going to assume so.
Would you say that was like a tikkun for Kalev? Because he had to work hard for
A
it?
tikkun for what?
I mean, every person has a tikkun.
So actually, in Shar HaGilgulim, in the Gates of Reincarnation, I don't want to say I don't remember offhand. It talks a lot about Kalev actually, and he was a Gilgul of other people, but I don't remember offhand. But I know for sure I've learned it, and that'd be fascinating to go look it up. But it definitely, without a doubt, talks about Kalev and who he was reincarnations of. We learned this years ago in Shar HaGilgulim, in the Gates of Reincarnation from the Arizal. I just don't remember offhand, so I don't want to say without looking it up. But definitely he was. I know for sure the Arizal talks about it. So it's a good point. So how did Kalev do this? How did Kalev get the strength to not be like the other guys? Yeshua, how did he do it? How did Yeshua not sin? How did he not succumb to temptation? What was the secret we mentioned last week? What happened? Moshe prayed for him. And now that Moshe prayed for him, that was afterwards. Moshe added a letter Yud to the name of Hosea to make it Yehoshua. By adding the Yud to the name of Joshua, now his name had Yud K, which is the name of God. So Moshe knew that even though Yeshua was very loyal to him, Yeshua may not have the strength to stay loyal and not to sin. So Moshe prays for Yeshua. Moshe prays for Yeshua. Moshe gives him a name change. He does he went to Sfardi Rabbi, got a segula, he got a blessing, he got a tikkun, he got everything. He's good to go. He was protected. I'm not making fun. I'm saying in a serious way. He went to Moshe. Moshe blessed him. Moshe changed his name, and he was spiritually protected. The sin of the spies had no impact on him. Moshe didn't do that for Kalev. Moshe didn't pray for Kalev. Moshe didn't make Kalev's struggle any easier. Seemingly, Moshe abandoned Kalev all on his own and said, okay, let's see what happens. Kulalev is not necessarily a good thing. A Kalev could be a...
The trait of the dog to be neiman to his...
Okay, dogs are loyal. That's true, but dogs are called kulalev in a negative way. No offense to all the pet lovers on the watching, but a Kalev, which is the name of Kalev, is kulo. The Talmud says kulalev, all heart. I mean, they're very emotional creatures. They don't have any barriers or. So why does Moshe not pray for Joshua? Well, let me say it differently. For Kalev. How does Kalev, without the help of Moshe Rabbeinu, how does he indeed make the right choice? What's the secret? What's the secret? How does Kalev overcome? We just explained that Kalev had to struggle deeply, and when he finally made the right choice, God is so excited he made the right choice that God calls him my servant. You have those that are, Yeshua is also a tzaddik. But Yeshua is a tzaddik that didn't serve God, meaning he didn't work to toil to serve God. And and Kalev, he's a servant that is working to serve God. Beautiful. So how did Kalev do that? What was the secret that Kalev had that enabled him to overcome? So the answer is also in the same verse. In the same verse where God is praising Kalev. And God is saying that my servant Kalev, he had a different spirit within him. Meaning, as we explained, he had the spirit to indulge and he also had the spirit of holiness within him. V'haviyosef, I will bring him, says God, to the land asher ba shama, to which he came. And him and his children, his descendants will inherit the land. Where is the land to which he came? As I mentioned, Hebron. Kalev realized, I need some spiritual protection. I need some spiritual protection. But right now, he's all alone. He's in the land of Israel. The other 10 spies are talking and they're planning and they're, conniving and they're coming up with all their plans, how they're going to speak bad about Moshe, how they're going to get the people to stay in the desert. They're full of negativity against Moses and against the will of God. And Kalev feels himself beginning to be influenced by the negativity of his friends. He can feel it happening. They're all talking bad around you. And when you hang out with people that are talking negative and are talking slander and are talking in a certain way, it will have an impact on you. Shabbos, the sermon was about closing your ears, about not listening to people, putting your fingers in your ears. But Kalev, he was getting influenced. He could feel his spiritual morale beginning to fall. And so Kalev did what became one of the secret tricks of Jewish people throughout all of time. He went to Hebron. He went to the graves of a tzaddik, or tzaddikim, to Avram, to Yitzchak, to Yaakov. He went to our forefathers, and he said, Father, save me. Give me strength. Give me the spiritual strength that I will overcome. Now, what happened when he prayed at the grave of a tzaddik? Let's analyze this for a second. Did Avram come out of Eretz Machpelah and put his hand in his head and bless him and pray for him? Did he change his name? No. What changed seemingly from before to after? Not strength of words. He came to a grave. We speak very we say very, very blunt. He came to a grave, he prayed, and he left. And nothing happened. Yeshua, tzaddik, Moshe, prayed for him. Moshe probably hugged him and kissed him. He changed his name. And Moshe davens for him. He got a blessing from a tzaddik. What did Kalev get? He got to pray at a grave. That's exactly what I'm going to. So what happens? So that's something I'm just asking the question because there's some naysayers that haven't experienced the Ohel yet to appreciate what you've appreciated, what you've experienced. What happened? What changed at that moment? When he was at the Ohel, when he was at the grave of the tzaddik. Or for us today, we have Moshe Machpelah, but for us, our father is the Rebbe. Our place where Hebron is for us is in Queens, New York, and you go to the Ohel and you're davening by the Rebbe's gravesite. At that moment, what happens? You don't see a miracle happen in front of your eyes, although there's been plenty of miracle stories that have happened at the Ohel. But that's not the point. At that moment, you reveal within yourself a power that you may not have known you had before. Kalev had the inner strength to overcome the spies, but he didn't know he had it. He was losing it. He was getting influenced. The Ruach Acheres Imo, the other spirit that was with him, was his own spirit. It wasn't some other spirit. It wasn't Avraham talking through Kalev. Kalev stood up strong.
Like the story you said with the guy that wrote with his troubles, put in his pocket at the red base.
Yeah, and he came to Israel. Yeah, that story. It's a beautiful story, huh? I said it's Shabbat. I said it's a powerful story. Powerful story. Powerful story. But the point is, but it does connect. But the point is, when you go to daven at the Ohel, when you go to daven by a grave of tzaddikim, it reveals within yourself your own ability to overcome the negative, to overcome the one, and to make the right choice. So the person making the right choice afterwards is you. But you need some help revealing the you inside you. Meaning Yeshua was naturally a goody-goody, naturally followed Moshe, naturally behaved, and naturally he was a natural tzaddik, a born tzaddik. So he wasn't, not born, he wasn't the biological tzaddik, he wasn't the biological child of Moshe, but it was easy for him. Last week we talked about people that have to make a choice and say, I choose to be religious. I choose to keep Shabbos. I choose to keep kosher. So I'm the rabbi. I was born into family rabbis, and someone else can have to make that choice. Beautiful. But even some of the people that make a choice to be about teshuvah, they make a choice to keep Shabbat, they make a choice to give charity, it's easy for them because it's still their nature. So though it wasn't their nurture, although they didn't grow up in that kind of a home, it wasn't their first, the way they grew up. But the choice to be religious, the choice to choose to adopt Moshe as their father, to adopt a religious lifestyle, is still, it fits their personality. And then you have the rest of us. The rest of us that are not naturally spiritual, and not naturally holy, and not naturally able to overcome our strong urges, and our strong temptations, and our strong desires. And we do get tempted when we see something pretty, or something that we want. And we do get tempted by joining our friends. And we do have FOMO for missing out on whatever party is happening on Shabbat that we can't go to, etc., etc. We do. What? Of course you could. Of course you could. I have it too, and I'm very religious. Of course. I'm just trying to give. The point is, that's the greatness of Kalev. There's a certain tzaddik who doesn't serve God, and there's a person who struggles to serve God. And that's the greatest pleasure God has. The Alter Rebbe gives an example to explain this. Between candy, I'll say cake, and a delicious gourmet meal. So if Debbie makes the cake, right? Regular cake, what? She makes it up. You make a cake, you make candy. Kid loves candy. Why does a kid love candy? It's sweet. It's all sugar. Sugar is sweet, the candy is sweet, beautiful. But it's a very simplistic pleasure. Real pleasure, if you really enjoy food, you don't like candy. You like a good piece of meat that has some, or a little bit of pepper, a little bit of salt, a little bit of, give me some of the spice, a little bit of mint, a little bit of ginger, a little bit of mustard, a little bit of, what else did you put on there? What? All that together. I don't cook anything. I don't know. I see Hannah putting stuff into salad. Like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to eat that. We're putting ketchup in a salad. Like, this is disgusting. Mayonnaise and mustard and stuff is going in there. She's pouring in salt and sugar and stuff. Like, oh my God, you're going to kill us all. That tastes great. What? You don't want to see how she makes stuff. Like, stuff is flying in there. And I'm looking like, that goes, honey and mustard. I saw honey and mustard going into a dish together. They're good together. For a man like me to see honey and mustard going into one dish, my eyeballs like popping out of my head. Like, what the heck is going on over here? Trying to poison us. It's like a prank. Who put honey and mustard? So how does honey and mustard taste good together? A perfect example. Because there's a certain, I don't know how to explain it in the right language. The flavors, they interact because there's a struggle between them. They're so different. They complement each other. They balance each other, they complement each other, and they bring out a flavor you would never have it with only honey or with only mustard. So a tzaddik like Yeshua is pure honey. Pure honey. It's delicious. Honey is sweet. It's delicious. It's zis. But it's pure honey. A conflicted, struggling soul like Kalev. A struggling soul like me and you, the guys that have struggles and temptations and urges, and we overcome them. We're like a big bowl with honey and mustard, and what else goes in the honey and mustard combination? Garlic and lemon, garlic and lemon, another like garlic and lemon, and you're throwing all this stuff together. And the finished product, what? Pepper, and throw it all in there. The more you throw in, the better. Just right up. Then you have now this is already an expert meal. This is already gourmet. This is something of a high level of cuisine. That's not just understand? I'm getting hungry. Understand? Look, I'm remembering the visual of the honey and the mustard going together, thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to ever eat that ever again. So I almost lost my appetite. They're saying, whatever. I saw stuff going into salads that boggles the mind. She's making, what? I don't watch. I just see. Well, I trust her. I trust it's going to come out good. I mean, I know that listen, it works. Her food's delicious. Her food's amazing. The point is, that's real taste, real pleasure. What does God get pleasure from? Honey? Yes, of course he does. Does God get pleasure from Joshua? Of course he does. But at the end of the day, in Torah tells us that Kalev is a very unique person. Kalev, and only Kalev, is my servant, because he had a different spirit with him. Meaning he had honey and mustard. He had a desire to be with the guys and to join their sin, and he had a desire to do the right thing. And in the end, he was able to bring it all together and to make the right choice and to utilize his desire to speak up publicly, to try and stop the spies from being effective in ruining the morale of the Jewish people. And because he could bring it all together and make the right choices, that's why he's the most delicious dish that you can imagine. So I want to finish with the story I was planning on ending with. Although it's not as beautiful as the story with the letter in the pocket, but it's a very beautiful story. And I've said it before, but and I'll say it again. It's a very powerful story. Very powerful story. Stories like this. There was a religious kid living in Belgium, Antwerp, years ago. We were a very religious family. And he was involved with Rabbi Slavatitsky, who was a Chabad rabbi in Antwerp. And then at some point he disappeared, like he didn't see him for a long time. And then he came back. And basically it came out that he fell in love with a non-Jewish girl. This boy from a very religious family. He fell in love with a non-Jewish girl. And it came to a point where his family obviously wouldn't accept it and couldn't come to terms with the fact that he was with a non-Jew. And they eloped. They eloped, they went away, and they came back, and basically decided they're getting married, and it be what it is. And obviously, if you're going to marry a non-Jew, you're not going to be religious anymore. So it's like, even if he grew up religious, his whole life was religious, but we're going to go to shul and daven and keep Shabbos, and then like with a non-Jew, it doesn't make sense. So he had no choice. He gave it all up. So his parents were going crazy. His parents were going crazy about this, and they tried to bring this rabbi to that rabbi to speak to him, but nothing was doing. They came to Mr. Slavatitsky if he could help. So Mr. Slavatitsky realized what was going on. He realized his kid's not, So he told them, you have to go to the Rebbe. Go tell the Rebbe. This is why. And he had all of his reasons why he was marrying her. He was a smart kid. He wasn't like a stupid kid that didn't know how to argue. He was a smart boy. You should go speak to the Rebbe. I can't answer you. And he was going to America. And the parents were nudging him, we should go see the Rebbe. The parents were not a Chabad family, but they would see anybody, And so finally made a deal. He told his parents, we're going to be in New York. I'll go see the Rebbe. And that's the last rabbi I'm going to see. And it is what it is. I'm not saying, okay. So he comes to dollars in New York. He comes to 770. He gets online Sunday to go get $1 of the Rebbe. He comes online for dollars. And he was all prepared. He had his speech ready. He's marrying a non-Jew. He was like, he comes before the Rebbe. He tells the Rebbe, I'm engaged. I'm marrying this non-Jewish girl. He was like ready for the screaming, the shouting. You're destroying Judaism and you're burning the Torah. And instead, the Rebbe looks at him and the Rebbe says to him, I'm jealous of you. I'm jealous of you. And that it totally startled him. It wasn't what he was expecting. And the Rebbe said with sincerity, didn't just like a trick, like a joke. The Rebbe said with full empathy, with full sympathy, full understanding, I'm jealous of you. And he gave the Rebbe and the Rebbe then explained to him. The Rebbe said to him that God never gives a person a challenge that they don't have the inner strength and they don't have the ability and the strength to overcome. The fact that God gave you, the bigger a test a person has, the bigger the person's challenges, the greater challenge, the greater strength they have to overcome. So the Rebbe says to him, the fact that you have such an unbelievable test to overcome, that you're in such a difficult situation where you're in love with a girl who's not Jewish, who's obviously not meant to be your soulmate and your partner for life, is a tremendous challenge, a tremendous test. The fact that God gave you such a difficult test to overcome means that God gave you the strength to overcome it. And I never said these words to this guy. To me, God never gave such a test. Meaning I don't have the strength of character that you need to overcome your test. I don't have that. God didn't give me that kind of a test. And therefore, I can't overcome that kind of challenge that you can overcome. What's the Rebbe saying here? First, two things he's saying. First of all, on the basic level, it's a tremendous challenge. Absolutely. I recognize your challenge. I validate your challenge. But you have the greatness within yourself to overcome the challenge. That's the basic understanding of the story. But there's a deeper point to the story. If you think about it for a few minutes, The Rebbe then said to him, but I never got such a challenge. I'm jealous of you because you have the ability to achieve a level of love and affection and dearness in the eyes of God that I, the Rebbe, can't achieve. The Rebbe bringing this guy up even higher than himself. But the Rebbe wasn't just saying it to say something nice. The Rebbe meant it. The Rebbe, on his level, could not achieve the level of closeness to Hashem, the level of a person who's working to serve God, who's struggling to serve God, the way this kid is dating a non-Jew had to. The Rebbe is like Yeshua. The Rebbe was born biologically, he was a tzaddik. Naturally, he was a tzaddik. The Rebbe was born a tzaddik. He had the personality of a tzaddik. The Rebbe was an inherently holy human being. This guy who's dating a non-Jew is not. He's Kalev. And the Rebbe is saying to him, the fact that God gave you such a great challenge, which means you have such great strength to overcome, means that you have the ability to achieve a level of greatness that even I can't achieve. And that's what God is saying about Kalev. Everyone else, they failed. Yeshua made the right choice, but he made the right choice, and he gets credit for it, but that was his nature. Kalev had to struggle to make the right choice, and God knows the struggle. God recognizes the struggle, and because he was able to bring out that other spirit in him, this is the most beautiful gourmet dish that you can imagine. So many unique, different flavors. Kalev, he is my servant. He is the one that I want to keep close to me forever and ever, and give him a portion of the land of Israel. Which portion? Hebron. The portion of the oil. Because by going to the oil, by going to the place of a tzaddik, he was able to reveal the place within himself that had that strength to be able to achieve that greatness, to overcome. That being said, this is a plug. I sent out an email today for the next Soul Trek, for the next trip to the oil, God willing, August 20th. It's in Elul. The next Sunday is the week of Eric and Julia's wedding. And they're getting married that week, so they can't travel that week together because that's going to be the week of their wedding. And the week after that is Labor Day weekend, so tickets will probably be very, very expensive that weekend. And the weekend after that is the weekend before Rosh Hashanah, which is Tichot and whatever. And then that Rosh Hashanah is that Sunday. So it's in the month of Elul. So the custom in Jewish law, talk about going to visit graves of tzaddikim, in the month of Elul. So that was the only. And the next Sunday, Sunday between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is Sunday night, Monday. So it's not like So I wanted to do, but Yom Kippur is on a Sunday night, Monday. So there is no Sunday between. I mean, the Sunday is Erev Yom Kippur. It's impossible to go on. You flake gets delayed, you miss Yom Kippur. That's not a good idea. It's not. What? Yeah, Sunday night. So we're not going to we're not going to travel on the day of Yom Kippur. That's so it's early. I was going to be the week later, but then because of their wedding, so they pushed it up 1 week so they could travel. What? But the point is, we go to the oil. Why do we go to the oil? Because we're praying to a human being? No. We're not going to pray for a tzaddik or to a tzaddik. We're going to reveal the power in our own soul. Kalev went to find the strength within himself to become the great person he knew he had to be. And when I go to the oil, I get the strength to be me. How do I have the ability to make the choices I make to become the person I am? Yes, I was born into it, and yes, and you can say it's my nature, although I can argue with you. But because I go to the oil on a regular basis, and I spiritually nurture myself, and I spiritually reveal the greatness that the Rebbe sees in me, and that's just today, I was in someone's office learning with somebody, and he mentioned this about with him a hope, whatever. So he mentioned to me an article he read from Jonathan Saxon, who was a former chief rabbi of England, who passed away 2-3 years ago. So he asks me, "You agree with Rabbi Sachs? You're a fan of his?" He said, "He's amazing. I love Rabbi Sachs. He passed away. He didn't know. The guy didn't know that he wasn't alive anymore. He just read some of his stuff." So I said, "I love Rabbi Sachs. Is an amazing thinker, a brilliant writer. I've taught many of his things. I've been used in my classes, in my sermons." So and I said, the story with him and the Rebbe. He didn't know that Jonathan Sachs and the Rebbe met. He didn't know the story. It's a very famous story, but it's the same idea. The first time that Jonathan Sachs was a young man, he was a student in Cambridge University. Those who don't know the story. This morning it came up. He was a student in Cambridge University. and he had a whole bunch of deep theological questions on Judaism, on religion. He was a very deep thinker. So he came to America. He had that summer off. He wanted to go see America, and he wanted to go see the world, and he also wanted to meet some of the big rabbis in America at the time. So he started in California, and he took a Greyhound bus, and he went from here to there. Or he was in California, he got a phone call to get a Yechidus. He took a Greyhound bus from California, came to New York, comes to Yechidus, a young Cambridge University college student. He asks the Rebbe his questions, and the Rebbe gave him answers, and then he says the story, the Rebbe turned the tables. The Rebbe turned the tables, and you hear there's many videos where he says the story, said it publicly in speeches. The Rebbe turned the tables on him, and then the Rebbe starts challenging him and asking him questions. What were the Jewish students on Cambridge University? Is there kosher food for the students at Cambridge? What's the social scene for the students? He was like trying to find an answer, but it was a bad situation. It's like the early 70s or the 60s. Students in Cambridge, wasn't a lot going on. So the Rebbe asks him, so what are you doing about it? The Rebbe asks him, what are you doing to help the Jewish community, the Jewish student community of Cambridge University, to help them in their... So he says it like a very polite Englishman, I started giving a very sophisticated way of saying no thank you. So he started saying, in the situation I find myself in, and the Rebbe cuts him off and says, no one finds himself in situations. You put yourself into a situation, and you can take yourself out of a situation. So you're there, but you can choose to make yourself a different situation. And basically he realized the Rebbe was flipping the table. And the Rebbe was telling him, you need to take responsibility for the Jewish life on Cambridge. He came back the next year, and the Rebbe pushed him. That's when after the next meeting, they started like a kosher food service. It's still in some form, I think, still exists in Cambridge University. And his beginning of Jewish activism and Jewish leadership was from this meeting with the Rebbe. It was from this meeting, and the Rebbe pushed him after he finished not to become an economics professor, which was what he was in school for, but instead to go into the rabbinate. And based on the Rebbe's encouragement, he went to the rabbinate, and that's how he indeed became eventually a rabbi. And then when there was an opportunity to become the chief rabbi, even before when he was a rabbi, he had another job, teaching rabbinical students. And I think that the rule then was that rabbis had to be full-time. They couldn't have another job. And the Rebbe lobbied the Orthodox Union of Rabbis in England to make an exception for Jonathan Sachs to be able to do both, be a rabbi and do his other job. The point is, as Jonathan Sachs says many times, what was the greatness of the Rebbe? It's many leaders that make lots of followers. The Rebbe was a leader that made many leaders. How did the Rebbe make many leaders? Because he revealed within a person, within themselves, the strength, the talent, the capabilities that they on their own may have not known that they had. The Rebbe helped them reveal that. And this was when the Rebbe was physically able to help reveal that. And today, through going to the oil, through going to the caver of a tzaddik, to the gravesite of a tzaddik, and connecting on a spiritual level to the spiritual soul of the tzaddik, it reveals the power of our soul in a way that could not be revealed otherwise. Without getting too Kabbalistic, the highest level of our souls, when you go into the oil, it's the Yechida, it's the Yechidus. I talk about this every time we go to the oil. I'll share the whole idea of the Yechida. The point is, Kalev went to the oil, he revealed the true power of his soul, and that's how he was able to choose, despite the challenges, despite the struggles, despite the conflict, to choose the right choice. That's the story, my friends. Okay. Any thoughts? I see Erica likes the Greyhound. Okay. What a story. Thank you for all the comments over here. Let's just see over here. No one wants to move, huh? I finished the class like stunned silence. Either everyone's fast asleep. No one moved. What? You go into the oil. When you go into the oil, that's Yechidus today.
Oh, really?
Yes. When you go into the oil, hello, Alan. How are you? Hello, Morty. Morty, thank you for the phone call Friday. The good news with your sister Baruch Hashem. Hello, Mario. Hello, Gail. It's 90 degrees in central Pennsylvania. Here it was 90 something. It was like 90. I don't know. It was in the 90s here too. Hello, Marsha. Okay. You're my friends. Lalato from all over the universe.